The moment the spotlight touched him, I swear the air changed. Chicago, that fall, backstage at a small but brightly lit stage where a 6-year-old Michael Jackson was about to perform. I, Jermaine Jackson, still remember how cold the curtain felt that night. It was more than just a strip of red velvet. It was like a wall dividing two worlds. Outside were the blinding lights, the clacking of shoes, the sounds of people waiting. Inside was the rapid breathing of a 6-year-old boy, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Michael stood right in front of me, so small that the light from above made him seem swallowed by the darkness. His soft curly hair glinted with the golden light from the string lights hanging loosely in the wings, but his eyes, round, deep, and always filled with curiosity, were now filled with worry. I could see every little movement she made, her hands clenching and unclenching, her shoes swaying as if she didn't know whether to move forward or backward. I put my hand on her shoulder. It was a small shoulder, but it was carrying an invisible weight. "Ready, Mike?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as light as possible. Michael looked up, his eyes glistening against the light. But they didn't just reflect it, they absorbed it as if it were piercing him, illuminating his innermost thoughts. I heard him inhale softly, his breath trembling like a string pulled out of tune. The MC's voice echoed from offstage. "Only a few minutes, folks. Stay tuned." His voice was loud and strong, startling Michael, who leaned back as if to step back. My instinct told me he was trying to shield himself from the sounds, from the pressure building up with each breath. I nodded to reassure him. "There's nothing to be afraid of tonight, just like home." But I knew, and Michael probably knew too, this wasn't like home. Here, every sound exploded in my ears. The light outside didn't just illuminate, it examined. The stage wasn't just a performance space. It was a deep pit, where if I missed a beat, she could fall. Michael looked out the small gap between the curtains and immediately clung to me. I felt her hand grip my shirt, fast, strong, and completely instinctive. It seemed like one more call, and she would turn and run. I leaned closer. "You're not alone. I'm here." It wasn't an empty reassurance. I truly believed it. But there was one thing I couldn't change. The light outside wasn't for me. It was waiting for her. Michael licked his lips, looking down at his tiny, shiny black shoes. The shoes he'd been so excited about hugging to his chest all afternoon while we'd rehearsed. That excitement was now just a shadow in his eyes. The small door at the back of the stage opened, and a cool breeze blew in. Michael shivered. I could hear his heart beating fast, almost out of sync with the sound of his shoes on stage. I saw him take a deep breath, then hold it. But as the stage manager's footsteps approached, Michael took a step back, his first step back that night. I reached out to catch him before his back hit the prop box behind him. "Michael," I called. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away, only his eyes. They moved quickly, swaying as if searching for a way out, as if the stage outside was a forest and he was the lost boy. Then she said very softly, "I am not sure I can do it." The words cut through the air like a knife. I could see her chest heaving, as if every breath was an effort. That emotion, I had never seen it in Michael before. At home, she always danced between us, singing as if music were the only language that existed. But here, right now, music seemed to be a challenge she did not dare touch. I bent down, placing my hand on her tiny hand. "Just step out, one step." She looked at me, a little scared but also clinging to hope. But as soon as the MC called louder, "Up next, the Jackson Brothers," Michael jerked. I saw her eyes blink, very quickly, but enough for me to understand. In her mind, she was imagining herself standing in that light, and unable to say a word. Michael turned his head. I saw clearly. She was about to run. In that moment, for a split second, I felt as if time had stopped. I knew, if I hesitated for even a second, Michael would disappear from this wing. I put my hand up to block it, gently but firmly. "Mike." She stopped, but her whole body was as tense as a string waiting to snap. I could feel the fear spreading from her hand to mine, cold, shivering, and real. The curtain began to open slightly. Stage light poured in, illuminating her face. It wasn't gentle. It was harsh, as if it were piercing her. Michael narrowed his eyes, tilting his head slightly toward me, seeking reassurance. I replied, "No one can step into that light for you." Outside, the crowd began to grow louder. Inside, Michael was caught between two choices. On one side was the familiar darkness of the backstage. One side is the light that could change your life forever, and I, Jermaine Jackson, am the only one standing between those two worlds. waiting to see which one you choose. I heard the shout like a thunderclap through the already stuffy space backstage. It didn't just call us to the stage, it pulled at the invisible strings that held Michael back. I saw his whole body jerk as if awakened from a dream he didn't want to leave. He turned to me, not for comfort, but for a way out. That look, I'd never seen it in Michael before. It wasn't fear exactly, it was deeper, more chaotic, as if there was a storm in his head he couldn't explain with words. Then it happened. Michael turned, gently but decisively, and that first step back, toward the small door that led to the dark hallway, was the clearest signal he was about to run. My reaction was too quick to think. I reached out, touched his small wrist, held him back. Not loud, but enough to stop her. "Mike," I said, my voice lower and more urgent than I intended. Michael paused as if he had been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. He turned to look at me, and this time there was nothing to stop the fear in his eyes from rising like water over the edge. I'm not sure I can do it." Her voice was as small as a breath. At 6, that voice should have been clear and innocent. But right now it was heavy, full of tension, as if she were confessing something she couldn't tell anyone else. I held her hand tighter, feeling the slight shiver that ran through her skin. Each of her fingers was cold, as if all the blood had drained from her, leaving only worry. Outside, the audience was still laughing and talking. From here, they were like a shapeless sea of sound, pressing down with each passing second. The stage light swept through the curtains, casting our shadows on the wooden floor, trembling with each heartbeat. "Look at me, Mike." I bent down, searching for his eyes. Michael swallowed, slowly turning his eyes to me. Those eyes were now like two broken pieces of mirror, reflecting the insecurity, the expectation, the pressure, and the feeling of being trapped in a situation beyond the child's ability. "You don't have to sing perfectly," I whispered. "Just walk away." But the words, though soft, inadvertently ignited an emotion I couldn't control. Michael shook his head, just a small shake, but a firm one. "I can't breathe, Jermaine. I'm scared." The words cut through the air like a slow but sure knife, and I, despite wanting to shield her, knew I couldn't fight the thing that gripped her heart, the fear of being exposed to the light. Marlon's voice called from behind. "Let's go. Ready?" Michael jerked so hard I felt like he was about to pull away from me again. "Mike, don't run." I spoke quickly but without command. I just tried to keep the fragile thread between her and the stage. She was breathing heavily, each breath so short it was almost choking. I put my hands on her shoulders, gently pulling her closer. She looked so small, I was afraid a gust of wind could blow her away. "Things out there aren't as scary as you think," I began, but Michael interrupted with a conflicted look. "The light," she whispered. "It's too strong." I understood. To a 6-year-old, the stage light was not a symbol of brilliance. It was a strange creature, too big, too bright, as if I got too close it would crush me. Suddenly, the sound of the microphone being tapped rang out. "Test, test, 1, 2. The metallic sound penetrated the wings like an electric current. Michael took another half step back. I was afraid that if I let go for even a few seconds, he would disappear from the backstage and run straight down the dark corridor. The light changed color, preparing for our performance. The curtain shook slightly. The wind from the air conditioner made it swell like a breathing creature. Michael inhaled sharply, but his breath was ragged as if he was stuck. I felt his chest rising and falling dangerously fast. "Mike," I called softly, pulling him closer. "Look at me. You're here, with me. Nothing's happening." She pursed her lips, her eyes watering slightly. She wasn't crying, just a huge emotion gripping her. Then the MC's voice rang out again, so loud it seemed like he was standing right behind us. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Jackson brothers." I heard the cheers roll in like ocean waves. In that moment, Michael blurted out, "I want to leave." My heart sank. If she ran, if this 6-year-old disappeared from the wings, the night would end in a way no one was prepared for. I leaned down close to her face, so close I could hear her breathing, ragged and shaky. "Mike." She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the battle between running and facing, between the safe darkness and the bright light that awaited, between fear and something growing inside her that she didn't yet understand. "I hold your hand, not pulling, not pushing, just holding. An anchor in the storm, and the curtain slowly opens." She stopped, but her whole body was as tense as a string waiting to snap. I could feel the fear spreading from her hand to mine, cold, shivering, and real. The curtain began to open slightly. Stage light poured in, illuminating her face. It wasn't gentle. It was harsh, as if it were piercing her. Michael narrowed his eyes, tilting his head slightly toward me, seeking reassurance. I replied, "No one can step into that light for you." Outside, the crowd began to grow louder. Inside, Michael was caught between two choices. On one side was the familiar darkness of the backstage. One side is the light that could change your life forever, and I, Jermaine Jackson, am the only one standing between those two worlds, waiting to see which one you choose. The air in front of me seemed to thicken, so thick that every breath felt like it was going through a wall. The curtain parted little by little, and the white light from outside shone directly into Michael and my eyes. It was no longer the light of a spotlight. It was like a streak of light examining us, pulling bits of our emotions out of the darkness. I took Michael's hand. His hand was so small that mine almost covered it. The trembling was still there, light but constant, like a drum beating in the palm of my hand. Outside, the lights were fully on. Long streaks of light crossed the room, hit the wooden floor, and bounced back up to the ceiling. The audience's voices faded, as if the whole room was waiting for this 6-year-old boy to either run away or to enter history. "Mike," I said softly, "I'm right behind you." Michael didn't answer. She just looked out, her eyes widening from too much light, too much noise, too much fate. The curtain opened wider. The wind from the stage system passed by, making her hair flutter. Her tiny white shirt began to shimmer under the light, as if the light was recognizing the object it was born to illuminate. Then she took a small step. Just one, but it was a step that took my breath away. Her heel touched the wooden floor of the stage. The light immediately grabbed her, fast, strong, almost aggressive. Michael stopped, hit by the bright light. But in that moment, something strange happened. I saw her eyes blink once, then open, wider, clearer, sharper. As if in a heartbeat, something inside her rose, something only the light could name. Michael inhaled slowly. His breath was no longer rapid, no longer trembling. It was as if his lungs were filled with that bright light. I stood behind him, watching his every little movement. His shoulders dropped, his fingers stretched, his head tilted slightly to the left, the way he always tilted when he felt the beat of the music. A stage manager from the left gave me the signal. It was time to start, but Michael remained still, no longer panicking, no longer wanting to run. It was as if he was feeling. The entire auditorium fell silent for a few seconds. A heavy silence, but a stunningly beautiful one. Michael stood there, a tiny 6-year-old boy in a sea of light, like the only bright spot everyone was looking at. I stepped up half a step behind him to prepare to sing the first line as we had practiced, but when I opened my mouth, Michael suddenly lifted his head, his eyes looking straight out into the audience. And he sang first, not shakily, not hesitantly, but clearly, so clear that the space seemed to vibrate. In that moment, I felt like time had slowed down. That voice, not like the voice from practice, not like the voice of the boy who had been afraid of the lights a few minutes ago. It was like a beam of light, not coming from the stage, but from him. I forgot to keep the beat. I just looked at Michael. He stood there small but full of energy, his voice pouring out as if he had waited for this moment for a long time. And the biggest plot twist happened. Michael smiled, a very small smile, but clear, a smile I had never seen backstage, the smile of someone who was enjoying. I felt a strange power emanating from him, not the loud kind, but the quiet, sure kind, as if the light had awakened a part of him that even he didn't know existed. The light no longer scared him. It was on his side, enveloping him, embracing him, lifting him up. The entire audience turned their eyes to that little boy. Some even leaned forward as if to listen more closely. A few soft "oh" rang out in the crowd. I saw everything change in that moment. Michael's expression, his demeanor, his presence. The boy who had been trembling and clinging to my hand had disappeared. In front of me now was a different version, strong, instinctive, as if born to stand in this light. I took a half step back, not because I wanted to leave my position, because I understand. This space is opening for you, not for me. Michael continues singing, each note clear and sure. The lights follow you, as if programmed to follow every tiny movement of your body. No one in the room takes their eyes off you, and I, Jermaine Jackson, stand behind you, feeling a chilling yet proud truth. This boy, my little brother, has just taken a small step onto the stage, and a big step into his own destiny. As the song prepares to move into the next verse, I inhale to get into the rhythm. But I know, from this moment on, this night will no longer be an ordinary show. It all starts with one step that takes Michael Jackson into the blazing fire, where the lights not only illuminate, but change him forever. She stopped, but her whole body was as tense as a string waiting to snap. I could feel the fear spreading from her hand to mine, cold, shivering, and real. The curtain began to open slightly. Stage light poured in, illuminating her face. It wasn't gentle. It was harsh, as if it were piercing her. Michael narrowed his eyes, tilting his head slightly toward me, seeking reassurance. I replied, "No one can step into that light for you." Outside, the crowd began to grow louder. Inside, Michael was caught between two choices. On one side was the familiar darkness of the backstage. One side is the light that could change your life forever, and I, Jermaine Jackson, am the only one standing between those two worlds, waiting to see which one you choose. I stood there right behind Michael, feeling as if I had just witnessed something so extraordinary that my brain couldn't process it. It would be years before I could find the words to describe the moment. But at that moment, all I felt was a small, bright spot of light, emanating from Michael and spreading out onto the stage. It wasn't the spotlight shining on him. He was glowing. The room was so quiet I could hear the microphone cord vibrating slightly with the vibrations of the floor. The people in the front row leaned forward, as if drawn to the 6-year-old boy standing in the center of the stage. I heard a tiny, "Oh my God," from somewhere in the crowd, a real visceral surprise sound. Michael stood still for a beat, then tilted his head slightly to the left in that very Michael tilt the world would later learn by heart. A very small movement, but intentional, and in that moment, I realized something that sent a chill down my spine. Michael was no longer afraid of the spotlight. The lights are afraid of you. I take more than half a step back, not because I want to give up space, but because I feel like I'm standing on a thin line where something is happening beyond my control. I see the shift in every little muscle in your shoulders. The panic tension is gone. Instead, there's a softness but certainty, like you're tuning into a rhythm only you can hear. The background music plays the next verse. I prepare to sing in the part I always play, but Michael takes a half step forward. Just a half step, but enough to put you in the spotlight, and the follow lights follow you, like a creature that knows how to choose. Your voice picks up in the next verse. Higher, stronger, more confident, a confidence that's not at all appropriate for a 6-year-old. The audience starts to murmur, not in disbelief, but in amazement. The room was caught in a whirlwind, and she was the center of it. I looked across the wings. 2 stagehands stood frozen, half-turned but unable to take their eyes off the stage. One of them even forgot to breathe, holding a clipboard but not taking any notes. But what chilled me the most was Michael's expression. Her lips curved into a small smile, so small, but it wasn't a forced smile. It was the smile of a child who realized she belonged, as if the stage wasn't a place she was being forced onto, but a place that was calling her name. I felt like the light was embracing her, highlighting every tiny detail of her face. Full, precise, radiant. I remember thinking, this isn't 6-year-old Michael anymore. This is the first version of someone the world wasn't ready for. A man in the audience suddenly stood up. The sound of a chair hitting the floor startled everyone. But then silence fell as he stared at the stage. His eyes never blinked. I knew the feeling. I couldn't take my eyes off Michael either. The song reached a small crescendo. That part was supposed to be for us, the older ones, to support Michael. But no, Michael led the beat. My boy led the beat. He turned slightly to the left, the light following him, drawing the outline of his shadow against the curtain behind him. A small shadow, but sharp. A shadow that no longer trembled. In that moment, I felt my heart pounding. Not because I was afraid he would forget the words, not because I was afraid he would stumble, but because I knew we were seeing something that was not normal. A moment of birth, a moment that, just by looking at it once, was enough to change the perception of anyone present. I heard someone whisper, "This kid, he was born to do this." Michael lowered his voice in a very smooth transition, something we had never practiced properly. He leaned forward, his left foot slightly back as if preparing for a movement to the beat of the music. All of it came naturally. I stood there watching him, feeling like I was no longer the older brother leading him, but the one witnessing a new path opening up right before my eyes. The audience began clapping in time, but they weren't leading Michael, they were following his. From offstage, their eyes lit up the same way the lights were shining on him. Everyone watched his every move as if they were absorbing it. I couldn't hear myself anymore. I could only hear his voice, so clear it seemed to penetrate the speakers. The boy who had once shivered and clung to my shirt in the wings now stood in the light, his small shoulders wide, and embracing every ray of light that shone down like an embrace. No one forced him, no one pushed him, no one had built this path. The light had called him, and Michael, at age 6, answered that call with something that made us all stand still. I remember the moment the song ended. Michael looked out at the audience, just to look, but it made the room explode with cheers. A moment, a look, a boy, and a destiny had just changed forever. I understood. We had just lost little Michael, and the world had just gained Michael Jackson. She stopped, but her whole body was as tense as a string waiting to snap. I could feel the fear spreading from her hand to mine, cold, shivering, and real. The curtain began to open slightly. Stage light poured in, illuminating her face. It wasn't gentle, it was harsh, as if it were piercing her. Michael narrowed his eyes, tilting his head slightly toward me, seeking reassurance. I replied, "No one can step into that light for you." Outside, the crowd began to grow louder. Inside, Michael was caught between two choices. On one side was the familiar darkness of the backstage. One side is the light that could change your life forever. And I, Jermaine Jackson, am the only one standing between those two worlds, waiting to see which one you choose. I stood on stage right behind my brother, feeling as if everything were spinning in slow motion. Not because the volume had quieted. On the contrary, the cheers were rolling like waves, so loud I could feel them vibrating under the soles of my feet. But something inside me quieted, a quiet truth, sharp, undeniable. I was no longer the center of the night. Neither were we, the Jackson brothers. The only focus was the 6-year-old boy standing in front of me. Michael turned his head to look at me briefly, just for a second, a quick glance anyone else might miss. But to me, his brother, the one who had just held his hand in the wings as he trembled, it felt like a soft, deep knife. Because I realized the child who had panicked and wanted to run off the stage just now was no longer there. There was no fear in Michael's eyes now, no hesitation. They were bright, but not innocently bright. Bright as if a door had opened, and he saw a world beyond it. I swallowed, not from a lump, but from the indescribable feeling spreading through my chest, pride, shock, and loss. A strange kind of loss, as if I had just witnessed my brother walk through a gate I could not walk through with him. The lights changed, sweeping across the stage. Michael didn't move, but the light seemed to revolve around him, centering him in a way so natural anyone would think it was planned, but it wasn't. The strangest thing was, it was the light that adjusted to Michael, not the other way around. I saw it clearly in the way the light clung to the contours of her face, reflected off her round, bright eyes, then spread to the floor, creating a small but prominent shadow, so sharp it seemed like she was trying to remember her shape. The whole room stood and clapped to the beat. But that beat, I realized, was not led by the music. It was Michael. She turned to face the audience again, just a slight tilt of her head. But that small movement was enough to make everyone in the room change their breathing. It was as if every eye was waiting to see what this boy would do next. I looked at Michael for so long that I forgot to keep my stage position. And in that moment, I had only one thought. The light had chosen her, and she had chosen it back. No more trembling, no more trying to escape, no more holding onto my shirt. The only thing left was the pure courage of a 6-year-old facing his greatest fear. I inhaled. The lights were hot on my skin. The sound echoed in my chest. The stage was spinning, but in the middle of that spinning, Michael stood firm. The boy stood firm. I saw the man in the front row, who had been standing since Michael's first note, now put his hand to his mouth, his face filled with astonishment. Next to him, 2 women looked at each other as if they had just witnessed something inexplicable. A child sat on his mother's lap, clapping to the beat of Michael's own, her face glowing. "That boy," someone whispered, "was born for this." The words reached me like a distant echo, but so sharp they sent my heart racing. Michael ended the last verse with a tiny squeal, a simple detail that made the entire stage explode with cheers. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her entire presence said what she was feeling. She was no longer afraid of the stage. She belonged. I felt my hand relax, not because I was letting go, but because Michael no longer needed me to hold on. A slight emptiness ran through my palm, like the feeling when you let go of a precious object. letting it fly away to the direction it was meant to go. I tried to hide it behind a smile, not because I was sad, but because I knew I had just witnessed the moment the world would talk about, the moment Michael Jackson, even at 6 years old, stepped out of the darkness and into the light that no one could touch except her. The music stopped. The lights came down one last time. The audience erupted. And in the middle of it all, my little boy let out a small smile. A smile not of a child being applauded, but of a soul that has just found its place. I stood there, silent. Part of my heart wanted to hug Michael like backstage, but the other part knew that it couldn't, because tonight didn't just awaken a talent, it also closed a small door, the door where Michael once hid behind my shoulder. I knew from here on, the stage would never let her go again, and the lights, the thing that once made her want to run away, now became her own language. As we bowed to the audience, I glanced at Michael. She was looking at the lights, not the crowd. The lights shone in her eyes, sparkling as if containing something I couldn't touch. A 6-year-old child, a small night in Chicago, a moment of just a few seconds, but that moment reverberated in our lives and in the world after that. Because from that night on, Michael stopped running from the stage. He started running towards it. A look, a boy, and a destiny had just changed forever. I understood. We had just lost little Michael, and the world had just gained Michael Jackson. She stopped, but her whole body was as tense as a string waiting to snap. I could feel the fear spreading from her hand to mine, cold, shivering, and real. The curtain began to open slightly. Stage light poured in, illuminating her face. It wasn't gentle, it was harsh, as if it were piercing her. Michael narrowed his eyes, tilting his head slightly toward me, seeking reassurance. I replied, "No one can step into that light for you." Outside, the crowd began to grow louder. Inside, Michael was caught between two choices. On one side was the familiar darkness of the backstage. One side is the light that could change your life forever, and I, Jermaine Jackson, am the only one standing between those two worlds, waiting to see which one you choose.